G'day, how you all doing? So this afternoon I've been asked to speak about what's it going to look like in a generation's time when everyone can program. So in order to do this, I sort of wanted to provide firstly the context as to how that's going to happen. How are we going to get to the stage where we're going to have a generation who can program? That's basically looking at the UK national curriculum and the role Codecademy is playing. And secondly then, trying to answer that specific question with the future and what it looks like. The way I'm going to try and answer that question is to try and use a bit of history to analyse the changes that have happened in the past and think about what might occur in the future. So with respect to the context, the big thing is, I don't know if a lot of people in the UK seem to be appreciative of this fact. In 2014, September 2014, next year, there's going to be a new computing curriculum in England. And this new computing curriculum is a big deal because it means that for the first time in the world, it's going to be compulsory for kids to be learning computing. It's not happening in anywhere else in the world. It's not in Estonia, it's not in South Korea or Singapore. It's right here in England. You know, before I was at different events talking to parents and talking to a lot of people, very few people seem to be appreciative of this fact, and it's a big deal. You know, in terms of international leadership, I speak to colleagues in Malaysia, Singapore, all these other countries, and when they find out about that it's happening here, like, they're astounded, and people are coming over, policymakers are coming over to England to find out more. So basically, it means that kids in schools, no more they're going to be learning Microsoft Office, no more, you know, learning Excel and real basic stuff like that. It's going to be real computing, real programming. So with regards to this, what do the changes involve? So looking at some more of the detail as to what's going to be coming ahead in September 2014. Firstly, it's very ambitious. It covers students aged 5 to 16. They're going to cover things related to web development, understanding how the internet works, how to create using HTML, CSS, that sort of thing. Then in the later key stage of learning, they're going to do real programming. They have to learn at least 2 programming languages. And the other emphasis is they're going to learn real computer science concepts, not just learn particular programming skills per se, but actually understand notions of abstraction, recursion, real higher order thinking that will help them even if they don't continue with programming down the track. So with this context, I want to sort of talk about how we're trying to make this happen, because obviously it's a big change, right? It's happening within 1 year. What's been happening on the ground to try and make this happen? So people like us at Codecademy, we're a website which is free to learn how to program, and we've created a site to work with the UK government, the DfE, the Department for Education, the Computing at School. And the idea is provide a resource for teachers which they can use to A, teach themselves if they need to skill up, but B, also use it with their students. So there's slides, there's interactive courses that were discussed before, quizzes and that sort of stuff. And the whole idea is to try and make it as easy and seamless as possible for the introduction of this in UK schools. So skipping that slide in terms of who we're working with, the real question, and I think what was asked of me to talk about, given that context, let's imagine down the track a success of that. We have the curriculum in place in schools, we have all these young people, they've all learnt to program, they're all as skilled as Nick, who was speaking here before. What does that look like? What does the world, how does it operate? What are the changes which are going to take place? So, I was thinking about how to answer this question, because when you try and crystal ball and gaze into the future and stuff, often you sort of end up feeling like, I don't know, like it could be anything. So what I thought I'd try to do is use a sort of historical approach and have that, using the lens of history to think about how the world has changed in a few specific domains. So in terms of limiting how the areas that I'm going to analyse, hopefully we can probably at least try to derive some more insights as to how things might change. So the areas I sort of want to focus on are education, socialising and romance, working, and entertainment. So obviously there are categories I've left out which are part of our everyday lives, but hopefully through these sort of 4 main domains that I've talked about, we can have a sense of trying to think about what might happen as technology evolves and people's skill sets evolve in the next 50 odd years. So what I want to do is compare those 4 domains in these key time periods. The 60s, now, and then 2060, when the next generation are fully formed with their coding skills and they're up to speed, and figure out what the world might look like in those 4 domains. So, 1960s education, it's not particularly glamorous and it's not particularly sexy or fun, right? You know, you've got black and white, some dude on a blackboard writing with chalk and stuff, like pretty passive as an exercise for students learning. No technology whatsoever, a lot of writing, a lot of rote, a lot of passive learning for students. 1960s socializing, so it's all in person, right? Like you have to go to, halls to do dancing and to meet people. There's sort of quite certain rules and quite rigid about how you approach, a potential spouse or potential partner. The interactions are much more human-based. 1960s working, we think about when I was trying to put this slide together, I first actually tried to get a picture from Mad Men, but all the pictures online of Mad Men just had them like smoking and drinking, so it didn't work out so well. So I had to use this picture. It's just the idea from the working back then, typewriters, pen and paper, the speed is a lot slower. Again, very minimal technology. And then 60s entertainment, you got the drive-in theatres, not that glamorous. Again, it's not that convenient, right? A lot of these things, I think you find, the core theme from the 60s is the friction and the sort of effort, human effort required to turn up and do stuff. So you think about 1960s socialising, you have to turn up to all these things and keep talking to people, and the network of your friends is much more limited. And similarly with your entertainment, the ability for you to get access to foreign films or different types of entertainment is a lot more limited because of the lack of distribution. So then I look at the current generation, the 2000 generation, and I think that what sort of defines this generation for me, despite people like Nick, is that it's a generation where people are very good at consuming technology. And I think, he was talking about, consuming content before and stuff. But think about most of us, if we don't have the skills with technology, we just consume what is put before us. So 2000 education, we all hear about, kids using iPads. But what are they doing on those iPads? A lot of that, use of the iPads is to be playing around, receiving the movement of colour and that sort of stuff. But they're not really, using the iPads beyond just consuming the technology. Similarly, 2000 socialising, right? Internet dating, it's a thing, like it or not. That's, again, use of technology to try and bridge some of those sort of divide that I was talking about before. You can expand your network a lot more than you did in the 60s, but here the socialising is, again, your consumption of a website that is produced for you. The way that they make the match is defined in a certain construct. 2000 working, so again, when we work, most of us are constrained by the tools that are given to us. You go to the office, you use Microsoft Office. That's how we make a lot of the business that we do. And in 2000, entertainment, we have our lolcats with YouTube. Again, sure, some people are, producing videos and uploading that, but the extent of the production of technology is a lot limited than what it possibly could be. So then you think about what happens with the 2050 or 2060 generation, right? That next generation that have learnt to code. With that new so-called superpower that they've talked about, people can start producing with technology. So instead of just consuming technology, which is given to you by a select group of people who know how to program and who decide what you get access to and what type of apps you use, if you have a broader group of people who can program, that's going to radically change the game of what's going to be out there. So 2050 education, obviously Codecademy is going to be a big deal. But the idea there, ignoring Codecademy, but the idea here is that if we think about the evolution of education, historically we saw the blackboard, the sage on the stage who was using the blackboard, writing some stuff, to kids having a little bit more personalised interaction of education with the iPad. In 2050, hopefully it's going to be much more active learning where it's going to be much more active learning because they're going to be learning by doing with stuff like Codecademy, and also much more personalised learning where there's adaptive learning, where computers can adapt to the individual needs of students and figure out what they need to get the best and learn the material better for themselves. So I feel pretty clear about what 2050 education looks like just because I spent a lot of time thinking about that. But in the other areas of socialising, working and entertainment, to be blunt, I have no idea what the coding generation will do in those domains. Anyone who tells you they do know is lying to you. But there are some principles, or there are some guiding thoughts around what it might mean if a generation can code. What I was alluding to earlier is that the current people who can code look like the people on the left. Programmers. When you think of programmers, you're thinking of people who look like that. Bad haircuts, glasses, and a little bit pasty. But the main overriding thing is young men are the people who mainly program, right? That's always this sort of predominant notion of who programmers are. And if you think about what that means, I was alluding to before, when the current coders are young men like this, they typically have a certain worldview, which is a bit more homogenous than otherwise would be, right? And what they're producing are apps or services or things which appeal to them. In the future, hopefully it's a bit more heterogeneous, it's a bit more diverse in terms of the people who can have that access to this particular skill. We have more women, hopefully, who will be programming. It's not just, people don't talk about, we need more women in programming because we just need more women in programming because we need equality. There are real reasons for this. We need people who have different skin colors and different backgrounds for real specific reasons, which I'll get to in my next slide. So the basic idea is that, when you talk about startups and you talk about businesses, often what you hear advice given is solve the problem you have. Because typically when you're creating a product or creating an app, it's easier to solve the problem that you have because you understand it better and you know how to produce a solution that solves it. So lots of apps and technologies are supply-driven. People just start with their own perspective and from what they understand, and they try to solve their own problem. So is it any surprise that there are so many websites like Hot or Not, a lot of dating websites, like a lot of websites which appeal to men because men are the ones who predominantly are doing these coding things, right? So it's not surprising that if you think about if in the next generation, if we have a diversity of talent, diversity of backgrounds of people with that skill set, the range of evolution and change in the type of technologies that will be available will radically differ. Women, I'm still shocked, there's a whole wide range of women's issues and stuff which never get talked about and technology could conceivably solve, whether it's reproductive rights. I'm not going to go talk about women's rights or women's issues because I'm not expert on that, but that's part of the problem, right? Because someone like me is unclear or not aware of the range of things that, problems that women need to solve. Like, no one's really out there solving them, and that means that technology isn't being as fully used as it could be. I think about games. I think about a lot of games that I see which get produced and stuff. The majority of games are appealing to boys. Now, you might say, well, it's because boys like gaming more than girls. Maybe that's true, maybe that's not. Maybe it's because the type of games produced aren't interesting to girls. So hopefully, if we have that generation of coding and then more women who code, the type of apps and the type of solutions will evolve. The second group I have are disabled people. I don't really know that much about sort of technology being used and appropriated for that minority group. It doesn't mean that it has to be a disabled person themselves who has to end up creating the app or whatever, right? But what it does mean is that if you have a generation of people who can program, the likelihood is that someone's going to have a brother or a father or someone who they really care about and understand disability, and they want to create an app to ease their pain or their suffering or make their lives that little bit easier. And the last little panel I have is basically first world problems. Again, the people who right now have the skill of knowing how to program are people in the first world, right? Like it or not, the majority of people solve first world problems. There's so many apps out there in San Francisco, which is like, I want to press a button on my phone and then someone will deliver alcohol to my door because I don't want to get out of my house. They're just solving first world problems. But if you have a generation of people in UK who can program, a lot of those people, even though they don't live in third world, you have a lot of migrants in the UK. They have families, they understand the conditions in other countries a lot better than those people who currently are the ones with the skill of programming. So, across these sort of three select groups that I've talked about, the opportunity of having the diversity of talent that will embrace technology and be able to produce technology that can help a wide range of people beyond, what technology reaches right now. So, in conclusion, I sort of talked about three main things today in my talk. Firstly, there's a UK computing curriculum change happening in September 2014. It's a big deal. It's the first in the world. It's going to really radically change a lot of the people who get introduced to technology and how they feel about it and how they get exposed to it and how they may continue with it. Right now, so few people get introduced to it, and so therefore so few people will continue on and become skilled at it. And hopefully someone like Codecademy are proud to sort of be a big part of that. The second part was sort of looking at then history and thinking of the evolution of how technology has changed 4 different domains of our life. Before, from no tech to consuming tech in the 2000s. And then looking to the future, the world of producing with technology is very exciting. The possibilities are great. You can expand the range of possibilities of what we produce with technology when you change the type of people who have that particular skill set. That's all from me. Thank you so much for your attention. Thank you.